Welcome to Show-Me Sports Legacies. This is your host, Jeff Crowley, with co-host Chris Hockenfels. And here we go. We're queuing up part 2 of our Mel Tjeerdsma episode called Pride in the Paw.
It's been a great visit so far with Coach Tjeerdsma at Northwest, and we're looking forward to hearing some more stories and some more about the second part of his career at Northwest and beyond.
He had already established himself, and there's just a lot more to the story, and we're going to bring it to you in this part 2.
It's Season 3, Episode 11. Let's go.
We had some great players. Tony Miles was a phenomenal special teams player. I mean, he and Seneca Holmes, those two guys were, as far as a pair of return guys, they were amazing. And I remember that was in '99 in the national championship game. We were down by 20 points or something to Carson Newman, and they had just scored, and they kicked off to us. Maybe we were down by 24. They kicked off to us, and I remember Seneca Holmes come off field, and he said they were running back, and he said, Tony said to him, "Get out of my way, dog. I'm taking this into the house."
I love that.
It seems like in turnarounds in football, too, football is such a strategic game, offense and defense, but it can just be one special teams play, just one out of all the special teams plays in a game. One can kind of crack the eggshell and everything changes, and that's why special teams sometimes forgotten, but sometimes is what you need to kind of carry you to a victory.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If you would look back, how many times has a team that's had a punt blocked won a game? Usually that if you get a punt blocked, you're done. You know, I mean, it just, that kind of goes along with it. And we blocked a lot of punts, I'll tell you that, a lot of kicks. And we had some guys that just took a lot of pride in it.
You always seem to have a good quarterback, a good running attack consistently, and one big receiver. You kind of had that formula. And in '99, you had Travis Miles from Rolla, Missouri. Then you had Tony Miles, as you mentioned. So you had a lot of talent out there at some of those key positions, and then people doing the workman stuff on the lines. And that was just an unbelievable game. I mean, talk us through, you're down big. You're down 2 touchdowns with less than 4 minutes to go, I believe.
We were down 15 points with 4 minutes to go. And when we got the ball, and I don't know if we had one timeout left or 2, but yeah, we were able to drive the ball down the field and score. And I remember saying to Scott Boswick, he always kind of helped me with special teams, and I said there was still like about 2.5 minutes left. We scored pretty quick, and we were down 8. And I said, "What do you think, Scott?" I said, "Should we try to kick deep and hold them so we get the ball back, or should we try to onside kick?" Typical Scott, he looked at me, he said, "Coach, we haven't held them all day." He said, "We better onside kick." So we did, and we didn't get it, but we held them, and we got the ball back, and we drove down the field. I don't know how much time was left, but we were down, like I said, we were still down 8 points, and we scored with 10 seconds left, and then went for 2, which we had to do. And of all the receivers, you know, we had Tony Miles and Seneca Holmes, and here was Ryan George. He was our third receiver, and we threw it. That was the play. We were going to throw it to him in the back of the end zone, and he made the catch and got us into overtime.
Okay, so I've got to ask you, whenever you're watching now in the NFL, but in college growing up, they always used to say every coach has that special 2-point play in his back pocket that when it comes down to the end of the game, he's going to run that 2-point play. Did you have your kind of go-to 2-point conversion play always kind of ready in your back pocket?
Well, we had a couple of them. Matter of fact, we ran a kind of a fly sweep to Tony Miles when we needed a 2-point conversion. That was in overtime when we needed a 2-point conversion. But it was funny because Travis and Ryan, they would stay out. Practice would be over, and Travis would be throwing him, floating it to the back of the end zone, you know, and Ryan would be making those catches. And when we scored with 10 seconds left, we had a hand signal for that play, and we called timeout, or maybe Carson Newman did, I don't know, but there was a timeout. But before we ever even communicated with Travis, he was making that hand signal. That's what he wanted, and that's what Coach Sabota wanted too. Jim was calling plays, and that's what he wanted. So, they believed in it. They had worked it enough. That was their go-to.
Now, that overtime had mishaps on special teams thanks to the kickers. Had a little problem kicking it between the uprights. There were some dicey moments for you there.
Well, the first overtime, we held them. And I remember we got the ball at the 25-yard line. And I remember Jim saying to me, Sabota said to me, three runs and kick it, right? And I said, that's right, because we had an All-American kicker. David Purnell was just automatic. And so that's what we did. We ran three at a 35 or 40-yard field goal. And I'll be darned if he didn't pull it to the left, and we had to play on. And then they missed that field goal, and they blocked ours. It was pretty bizarre. And then they were going to go in to score again when we scored to go ahead by 6 in the fourth overtime, and they were moving the ball. And fortunately, they put it on the ground, and we recovered it. So
I remember that broadcast. I was watching it at home with my wife, who was all into this. My dad was watching it up in Montana. And because Travis had played in Rolla, she'd been a teacher in the Rolla system and knew him.
Okay, yeah.
So I was a big fan of that. And I just remember watching that game, and Bill Curry was the announcer, and he was a former Alabama coach, and he was pretty impressed with the whole game, but it was a wild game. Probably one of the most memorable games he ever broadcast on ESPN.
Yeah, Bill Curry, quick story. Bill Curry became a good friend through that. And Ken Sparks, the head coach at Carson Newman, was a very good friend of mine. And after that game, that year and for a number of years after that, Ken and I would be together at the AFCA convention. We always have a big convention in January. We were together a lot. And unfortunately, we would see Bill Curry. And Bill Curry, the first thing Bill Curry would say is, 99 Carson Newman, Northwest Missouri game, the best game I ever announced. And I'm standing there with Ken feeling sorry for Ken, So.
You should have said, I agree with you 100%.
I didn't say a word. And the neat thing now is that Ken has passed away. He had prostate cancer, and he passed away a number of years ago. But he has been voted into the College Football Hall of Fame, and he'll be inducted this fall or this winter. And nobody is more deserving than him. He was a great person. Our wives were really close friends. They're still close friends, and we talked to his wife, Carol, a lot. Yeah, I really liked Bill Curry, but I really didn't want to see him when I was with Ken, because that would be the first thing that you mentioned.
Right. That's tough. Okay, this is a great moment. You've won 2 straight national championships. So let's talk about, in 2002, there's something kind of unique started when you guys started playing Pittsburgh State down at Arrowhead Stadium in the Fall Classic. And that was kind of a big thing here in the Midwest, and a big thing for Division II football, I think, when that rivalry could create that kind of a game on a professional field. So talk about that a little bit, that Pittsburgh State rivalry and that particular game.
Well, in the spring of 2002, at the end of the 2001 season, we decided that we had the money to build a new stadium, and that was the next step for us. And so, you know how construction goes, it wasn't going to get done, and we were going to have some alternate plans for the 2002 season. And we had like you have golf bleachers, we had those set up. Our visitor side, our student side was all new, and so we could seat a lot of people there. But our athletic director at the time was Bob Borchter, and Bob said to me in the spring of 2002, he said, Coach, he said, we're scheduled to play Pitt State at home. He said, I don't know what we're going to do, because he said, we're going to have an overflow crowd. He said, we just won't be able to handle it. He said, would you consider playing it at a neutral site? And I said, well, yeah, I suppose. I said, what neutral site do you have in mind? And he said, I'm going to see if we can play it at Arrowhead. And I didn't laugh. Bob was a good friend. I didn't laugh at him, but I thought, well, that's crazy. There's no way they're going to let us play a Division II game at Arrowhead. They don't even play Division I games there. And so it happened that his oldest son, Mark, was playing for the Chiefs at the time, if you remember, Mark
Yes.
Borden. So Bob had a little bit of an in and knew some people there. Well, it ended up that they thought it would work. And so we played it on a Thursday night, I think, is when we played the first one. And it was an unbelievable experience for both teams. And I remember, I think we had just about 28,000 people there, which probably the biggest crowd we'd ever played in front of was probably about 8,000 or 9,000 at the most. So it was a great thrill for our kids. We played extremely well. I remember Mitch Herring. I think Mitch was the sophomore or junior that year, a Maryville kid, and he scored 2 or 3 touchdowns, and we ended up winning the game. But it was a great experience. Well, then that was our game. And so we financially, we had a windfall. Well, Pitt State, I mean, they knew that we made a lot of money on that game. So they decided the next year we worked it out so that we went there again, and it was their game. And then after that, I think for the next 10 years, it was just a joint affair. And so we split the proceeds each time. And so we had some really good games there. We beat them in overtime one time. I remember we talk about block kicks. They had a field goal late in the game. It was a chip shot, and we blocked it, came off the edge and blocked it, and that won the game for us. That was early on. That was probably in 04, 05. But we had some great, and it was a great experience. It was really great for recruiting because you could bring kids in and say, hey, you're going to get the opportunity to play at Arrowhead. Man, it was like, really, it was really good.
Yeah, the eyebrows probably go up when they hear that, because who gets a chance to play at that? Because a lot of the kids aren't going to go on and play in the NFL, but I get a chance to play at an NFL stadium that's locked in. And I didn't realize it was 10 years that you played there. And was it Pitt State for all 10 of those?
I think, matter of fact, I think it might have been 12.
12.
I'd have to look. The first 2 years, first year it was our game. The second year it was their game. And then I think we went 10 years in a row where we split it. And then after that, we played Central Missouri. When I came back as athletic director, Pitt wanted to get out of it. They didn't feel like it was beneficial to them. And so we played Central Missouri at Arrowhead one time, I think, for sure.
That sounds
maybe two.
Right, yeah.
And then it ended. Now we're back to playing Pitt State at the soccer stadium last year, and we're going to do it again this year. So it's just a neat experience for Division II kids. When you come out of that tunnel and onto that field and there's 20,000 people or more there, it's pretty exciting.
It's intense and it's fun. So your program doesn't back off at all, but you go 4 or 5 years before you make it back to that title game. And then you have a run of 4 years where you make it to the title game every year, but you don't get the title. As a coach, how do you keep going back in the well? How do you keep the momentum, not let that drag you down? The first year, I'm sure you're coming back in year 2 and you're going to make up for that first loss, but then it builds up. That's got to be tough or present some challenges. But on the other hand, you're going to Florence, Alabama every year.
Well, I was hoping we wouldn't talk about that. Those were probably the most painful losses I think I've experienced. We lost 4 years in a row in the national championship game, and the biggest margin was 7 points.
Yes.
And I can relive each one of those games, and I can tell you 3 plays that turned that game around that in my mind, if we'd have made those plays, we would have won. I'm not sure that's true, but that's my mind. And so it was tough. I think the one thing that through it all, I think it says so much about our program that we were able to overcome that disappointment and get right back there, and then experience the disappointment again and get back there again. It was frustrating, but I'm so proud of, those teams that suffered that disappointment. And that's a huge disappointment.
Oh, yeah.
People can say, well, boy, I wish we were there. At least you were in a championship game. Well, when you get in a championship game, that's not what you're there for. You want to win it, especially since we'd won it a couple of times. And so I had total ultimate respect for those kids that kept coming back and kept making it there. And even though like I said, we suffered that disappointment. The 2009 team that finally won it again, I was so proud of them, because those guys were redshirt freshmen that first year in 2005. He's my next door neighbor now. Miles Burnside was a great player for us, and academic All-American, all that. And Miles was always kind of quiet. He didn't say a lot, but he was one of our captains. And I'll never forget, he was redshirt in 05 and then suffered in 6, 7, and 8. We lost each time. In his senior year in 09, when we won it and they gave that championship trophy up, I remember him standing up there. He put that thing above his head, and I think he was about 15 feet tall. He was so proud. Think of how hard it was to put up with that. and then come back each year. It was pretty amazing. And like I said, it says so much about the atmosphere, the culture that we develop, and to see that in real time, to finally get it done, that was pretty amazing.
I hear a lot of coaches talk about for long-term success, we may put the same helmet on and have the same logo, but each team every year has its own personality, its own story. And even though some of the coaches are the same and the players are the same, every team is a little bit different. They go through different adversity. They have injuries. They have different things that they have to overcome. And so that's what makes these long-term runs so great is even though every team is its own team and has its own personality, they have a common goal and they do it for their university and for that logo. And so to have that run and then to cap it off in 2009 after the previous 4 years had to be really special.
It really was. And I was thrilled for those guys. Like I said, the guys that were seniors had been redshirt freshmen in 2005, and then most of those guys had been there, even though they were redshirt freshmen, they had been a part of the team, and so they were there for that championship game. They were there for all four of them, and they'd gone through all that disappointment. And even in 2009, it wasn't easy. We had Grand Valley down. We had them down by 10 points, I think, at one point. Maybe 2 touchdowns, but then they drove down and late in the game and scored, and it looked like they were going to get a stop on us. And we ended up on 4th down play completing a play action pass to Jake Soy, and that clinched it for us. There was a lot of sighs of relief when when the clock got to 0 and we were ahead. That was pretty special.
Tell us about that special teams play that kept them at bay a little bit when they were going for an extra point and there's blocked kick and a scoop.
Yep, and we ran it back. We couldn't help ourselves. We had to celebrate before we got there. So even though we ran it, we did get the 2-point conversion, but we got a 15-yard penalty, which I wasn't very happy about. So, but yeah, that was a huge play too. I mean, there was a lot of plays in there. I can't even remember on one of the returns, we had a crackback block, which isn't legal now, but was one of our linebackers. He was a transfer. And I mean, he literally just lit a guy up. I'll never forget that. Ron Everly, I think, was his name. Now he'd be kicked out of the game, but at that time it was legal. So there's lots of things about each of those games. Like I said, I could go back through and give you a play or two that changed the game in each one of them.
I like the headline that I saw after that game. It said it kind of was a precursor of something that happened with the Royals. This one was called 5 times worth the wait. And I remember that call after Salvi hit the ball down the third baseline. The Royals went on into the playoffs and won that wild card game. I think the call was something about 25 years worth the wait.
Yeah.
With the Royals had waited a lot longer than you did.
It's just something that stuck in your mind. Once we got past few weeks, we got past the loss and get back home and get back to work. Like I said, I just give our kids a lot of credit because they were able to flush it and focus on what was ahead and not hang their heads on what was behind.
So you were in the national title game so many times. I get this little story. I was the athletic director at Trenton during this run, and we always had our Trenton wrestling tournament on the same Saturday that you played the national championship game in December. And our crew of officials would always come from Maryville. And it got to the point where they would not come unless in the contract I would have a TV in the hospitality room that had the game on. If I wasn't, and at that point we didn't have ESPN automatically pumped into the classroom. So I had to find a way to get the game on in the hospitality room so the official that wasn't out on the mat could run in there, watch a game for a while, have a drink. Then they'd run out, the other official would run in there and watch part of the game, and it got to be kind of a fun thing. And it seemed like it was every year for about, 7 or 8 years. They would come and they would do it as long as they could watch the game too.
Yeah, well, that's good. We have some great fans, I'll tell you that. Just amazing how they followed. I know it was frustrating for them too. So
I'm going to talk about weather. Just a minute. You alluded to these rain games and things, and I don't remember what year it was, but I remember it was one of the first games that was on ESPN before you got to the title game when they started showing a semifinal game or something. And it was so cold in Maryville that day that it was dangerously cold, I guess. And I have still never seen that much Carhartt gear worn to a stadium than I saw that night. I mean, everybody came prepped for that event, and you guys pushed on through and won that game, as I recall. But I'm going to talk about a couple things. One is that you kind of always poo-pooed weather as an excuse. I think your quote was, weather is a factor when you're not ready to play, but if you're mentally focused, then the team that's more focused has a tremendous advantage. And that was from 2006 game over Nebraska-Omaha. And so I saw this parallel with a guy that went to 4 Super Bowls, Marv Levy, and I found a quote that I thought was interesting. And he described weather, and he said, when it's too hard for them, it's just right for us. That was his quote. So you obviously had some toughness that came from Northwest can be a pretty cold, bitter winter place, and you had some toughness built into your teams.
Well, there's no doubt about that. All you had to do is come to practice out here. And, of course, we didn't have the indoor facility when I was coaching. So our practice fields, are on the northwest corner of the campus. And in December, when that cold wind is blowing out of the northwest and there's nothing to stop it, other than a few light poles.
What a quote. I'm going to use that.
It gets pretty cold. And so we experienced, I think we experienced probably worse weather in practice for the most part than we did in games. We had some cold games. The worst game by far was my last game, and that was in 2010 when we went to Duluth in the semifinals. And the wind chill, the real temperature, I think, was like in the low single digits, and the wind chill was like 25 below. And that was bitterly cold. And so, I think as long as you approach, I always felt like with the rain and that kind of stuff, that if you approach it, if you prepare for it and your kids know it's coming and you say, we're going to have to get through it. It's just one of the things. It's an element, and we're going to have to get through it. I always felt like we really played well in bad weather. And even that game, the one we lost, that was my last game in 2010, we played exceptionally well. We were shorthanded. We were missing our tight end. We were missing a defensive end. And we had some chances to win that game at Duluth, and that would have been monumental. I remember after the game, a few weeks later at the National Convention, the Duluth coaches even said they were cold that night. So that made me feel better. I thought those people didn't get cold. It's just so much of it is mental.
Yeah.
And that's true with a lot of things in sports, is if you can overcome those mental setbacks, you can be a lot more successul.
You didn't even really get to enjoy the dedication of the field as the Mel Tjeerdsma field, because that game got struck by lightning and had a disputed result because it's a pretty short game. You tried for hours to play that game, and you just couldn't do it.
No, we wanted to get it done, and then to top it all off, it didn't even count. We had a nice lead on them, and we couldn't even count it as a win that year. That was 2007. Yeah, that was quite a delay.
Yeah, it sounded like you waited it out a long time, but it just didn't.
Yeah,
didn't happen.
It was probably 11:30 before we finally gave up and just said, we're not going to
get it in.
Rain coming yet. We're not going to get it in.
You didn't even get through the first quarter, as I recall.
Mother Nature undefeated still.
Yeah, there you go.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about after you win your national championship, at least the first one, I think, and then the last one, you had some opportunities, or at least looked at some opportunities in Texas, at the University of Texas San Antonio, and then earlier at Stephen F. Austin. So talk about your choice to remain at Maryville, the things you looked at, and maybe how that turned out and how you felt about that in the long run.
Well, first of all, they both made bad choices, I think. So
yeah, I agree with you. Totally.
No, I've got a really strong faith. So I just really believe that, the Lord was in control, and he, there, for whatever reason, the Stephen F. Austin thing, that was after the 98 championship, our first one. And, I was better off at Northwest, as it turned out.
Yes.
And then the San Antonio thing, that really hurt me because I love San Antonio. I thought all along that I was the pick for it, and then it got muddied up and I wasn't. But, that was in 2008, spring of 2009, and then we come back and win the national championship in 2009. So the benefit was there, that was the way it was supposed to be. So there's times when I look back and I think, yeah, could I have coached in Division I? I think I could have, but man, I certainly can't complain about the career I've had in Division II. And when it's all said and done, it's really about the people, that you come in contact with and the people that you work with. And, I've had a couple of years, it's almost exactly 2 years ago that I was diagnosed with a type of leukemia. And that hasn't been easy, but to have the support from all these former players and coaches that I've coached with and coached against, and that made it so much easier. That you just develop that respect and a care and a love that you can't explain. I mean, it's just it's something that's really special. So, like I said, those deals, the San Antonio one was the one that I really was disappointed on that, but as it turned out, it was a lot better for me anyway. So I'm happy I'm at where I'm now, and things have worked out really well.
After you stopped coaching, you didn't really ever stop being involved with football or coaching, but you led the United States American football team to victory in the 2011 IFAF World Cup in Austria. Tell us, was there any good story coming out of that experience?
Oh, man. I've had great experiences wherever I've been, but that might have been the greatest experience of all. And part of it is that first of all, I was so proud because I talked Larry Karras, who was a coach at Mount Union, won all those national championships. I talked Larry into coming, and he was my offensive coordinator. And he's a really close friend, and he and his wife, Linda, is a real close friend with my wife, Carol. And so Larry and I talk a lot. Even now, we talk about every other week. And just about every time we talk, something comes up about that experience. And it was just, it was a great, I can't say enough about the experience. And I found out about it. I was going to coach, got the appointment in January of that year, and immediately had to recruit. I had to recruit players. And this is right after I'd retired from coaching. And here I am on the phone day and night recruiting players from all over the country, from all divisions. And we had 45 spots that we filled. And pretty quick on, I got Larry to commit to be the offensive coordinator. And then I got Lou Tepper, who was a former head coach at Illinois, Lou to coach the defense. And so Lou helped me recruit some. Larry really didn't because he was still coaching. And so between Lou and I, we recruited that team, and we just had guys from like I said, all levels. And the way they bonded, we had a week's practice in Illinois. We were there for a week, and then we flew to Austria. And it was like a volleyball tournament. They had a pod. They had 2 pods of 4 teams each. We played 3 games. We had to play all 3 teams in our pod, and we played every other night in football. we played 3 games in 6 days.
Wait a second. We get a week off. Did you tell them we get a week off in the United States?
We didn't get any time off at all. We had in our group, we had Germany, we had Australia. They were bad. We beat them the first game. And then we had Germany. They were pretty good. And then we had Mexico, and they were real good. As a matter of fact, they had a guy that was playing for the Raiders that played defensive lineman. We only beat them by about 10 points, I think. And then we got to the championship game. In the other pod, there was Austria and France and Canada and Japan, I believe. And Canada came out of that. And Canada had a bunch of guys from the CFL, which you could have anybody. There was no limit on whether they were professional or not. And so we go to Vienna to play the championship game. And we did have some time then. We had about 6 days to prepare for that. But we blew Canada out. We won like 40-something to 10. It was neat. It was a great experience. And our quarterback was Cody Hawkins. If you remember Dan Hawkins, who was the coach at Colorado.
Yes.
And before that, Boise State, it was Dan's son. And Cody was an undersized Division I quarterback. He was about 5'10", and he had such a great spirit. And we had some really good players. We had Miles Burnside, Dane Wardenberg. We had 4 or 5 kids. Tyler Roach, he was a last-minute addition. We missed. We had a defensive lineman that couldn't make it, and he came to take his place. But we had such a great time, and to see those kids come together in a couple of weeks. It was really amazing. And I remember after a couple of days, I told Carol, I said, there's no doubt why Mount Union won all those games. I said, Larry Karras is a great coach. He was just phenomenal.
So were these kids college kids that had just graduated, or were you able to pull
yes,
current?
We recruited guys that had just graduated but weren't going to play in the NFL. Now, we did have a tight end, and I can't even remember where he was from. He ended up playing in the NFL for a few years. He got a chance when we got back. But, yeah, most of them were guys that weren't going to be invited to a camp, but they still wanted to play. And so we had Iowa, Iowa State. We had several Division I guys. We were split Division I, Division II, FCS, FBS. We had 45 players, and so we had to make it work, but we got it done.
That's incredible that you had only a week in such a short window to get a team ready, and then you went over there and had success. That's crazy, because football, you think, I've got to have a 3-week camp and then 3 weeks of practice before I can get this team ready to go, and you had like a week. Let's go.
I remember at that time we wore wristbands, at Northwest the last number of years. We had the plays on the wristbands, and then we just signal in the number, and they'd look at the play on the wristband. Well, I took along a young guy. Jordan Brown was a grad assistant, but he was a great organizer, so I took him as one of my assistants. And he and Larry Karras, Larry had never used wristbands, and so they developed a wristband. Not only did they have the play on it, but for the receivers, they had to route. They drew it so that with a flip side, they had enough. We didn't have that many plays, so they could look, and the receiver could look and say, okay, that's my route. And it was pretty neat how creative we were and how we got things done. But just to see those guys come together, and then, I've never experienced anything like that, but it's just special. You walk out there and you're representing your country. You're not representing Northwest Missouri, you're representing the USA, and that was really special. It was a great thrill and one of the best opportunities I had in my lifetime.
Okay, what was on the helmet? What did you have on the helmet? Was it a USA flag, an eagle? I'm curious now.
I got one up here, sitting here. It's got USA on it, and it's got stars and stripes, just a little bit of stars and stripes.
Oh, very cool.
And the people in Austria, we played that pod, we played those games all in Innsbruck. The 4 teams that I mentioned, we were all in Innsbruck, and we played every other night in Innsbruck. They had football, so they knew a little bit about football, but they knew a lot more about partying. And they'd come to the games, and they'd have a great time. And for whatever reason, I don't even know what the name of the song is, but Sweet Caroline, that was every time there was a dead time, they were singing Sweet Caroline, and the whole crowd, and it was just crazy. We still talk about those experiences.
Innsbruck hosted a Winter Olympics, so they've got a little history.
Innsbruck, they had the big ski lift there, ski mountain. It was in the summer, so it was grass, but it was interesting because they were jumping off of that on grass.
Wow.
They used that as training, and there wasn't any snow there. They were landing on grass. So
goodness,
it was pretty neat.
It's going to be tough to be a jumper.
Yeah. Different kind of mentality.
One story about that: that last game in Vienna, we went from Innsbruck to Vienna for the championship game, and they played all 4 games. They played the 7th, 8th place game, the 5th and 6th, 3rd and 4th, and then the championship game. They played those 2 days in Vienna, and we were the last game, and it was a Saturday evening, and we flew out Sunday morning, and I remember we won, and everybody was real happy, and they were going to have a big celebration for our team. The USA thing was in the hotel that night when we got back. And I'll remember on the bus, Larry Karras and I were talking, and he said, what are you going to tell these guys? Because, they're 20 years old and older, they can drink legally and all that. And I said to him, okay, here's the deal. I said, we got a celebration. I said, all you got to remember, all you have to know is that the bus leaves tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to the airport. And if you're not here, we're not waiting for you. If you want to stay in Austria, that's your business. But the plane is going to leave. And so,
please, no international incidents.
Down at the hotel lobby about 8 o'clock, and there were guys that had just just walked in. And they were sitting along the wall. They hadn't been in their rooms all night, but everybody made the plane, so we
good.
took them all back.
I love it. So, you've had a long time in retirement, but you're still involved with college football in some significant ways. Could you talk to us kind of as we get ready to wind this down about rules and the whole NIL, the whole landscape of college football and how that's impacted D2 and what your involvement in that is?
Well, I've been involved ever since I've retired. I've been involved with a program that Division II started. In Division II, I think Division III might have it now too. It's called Coaches Connection. And we have it in Division II. We have it for just about every sport that Division II has. But I have a group of coaches. I have one coach from each conference in Division II that plays football. Each conference that plays football. So I think there's 16 conferences. And we have a conference call once a month, 9 months out of the year, starting in the fall. And we just talk about and come up with ideas of what we can do to make football better. One of the first things we did was we got some changes made to the summer workout thing. I mean, Division II had some goofy rules as far as summer workouts. You could have a strength coach work with your kids, but in the rule, it said the strength coach couldn't encourage them.
In the weight room.
In the weight room, yeah. What a dumb thing, So those are the kind of things we had to work with. We also, a couple of years ago, we got passed through legislative. Division II is all legislative. You have a convention and every school has a vote and you got to go through this process. But we got a number of years ago, we got the 4-game red shirt for Division II. Division I had it. And we had a 3-game red shirt. I think they could play in 3 games. It's still red shirt. We got that passed. And then a couple of years ago, maybe it was just last year, we got what they call week 0, which Division II could never play in week 0, the very first week. We had in Division II, if you had 11 games, you had 11 weeks to play 11 games. And so now we can play 11 games. That's the maximum. But now we'll be starting a week earlier. We've got 12 weeks to play 11 games. So you can have an open date in there. And that was a kind of a controversial thing. And we're working on a deal now where, to give coaches a little more contact with the student athletes in the summer and in the off season. Not a lot, but to give them a little bit of that. So, so those are all things. As far as the NIL and all that, another thing that we just got passed is that our transfer windows, what they call the transfer portal windows, now match Division I. Before, Division I had theirs, and then we really didn't have a transfer portal window. Our kids could go at any time. So Division I, they would have their transfer portal windows in January. So then they knew how many kids they lost and what they needed. And then they would cherry pick Division II kids, right up until the season started. Well, now they're not going to be able to do that because our windows are going to be the same as theirs as far as transfer. And there's just some things. Matter of fact, I just saw, and I don't know how much of it's true yet or not. I haven't seen officially, but they're talking about changing the transfer rule to one-time transfer anywhere. I mean, transfer and be eligible immediately, but then after that, any other transfer, a second transfer, you'd have to sit out a year. And they're talking about kids can now have agents. High school kids can have agents. Well, now they're saying that, okay, they can have agents, but they have to be certified, which is great. Because, anybody could be an agent. Their dad's friend, some recruit's dad's friend could be his agent. They don't have a clue of what's going on, but yet they control things. So those are all things that I think we're going to see in college football in the next 5 years total. We're going to see some things go back to a little more normalcy, some more rules. We've totally gotten away from any rules at all as far as transfers are concerned and as far as money's concerned. So I think we're going to see that rein. I think they're going to have to rein that back in, or we're going to end up losing college football.
Yeah, we went from getting a NCAA violation for a ham sandwich on a recruiting visit to the current NIL and transfer portal state. There's got to be some way to get back to the middle, right, to the mean, and like you said, balance out a little bit. Yeah,
there's no doubt about that, and I think it's funny because when The NIL and all that stuff, the transfer stuff, all of that happened, and that was all determined without any coach's input.
Right.
That was all determined by administrators and, conference commissioners and that type of thing. And there were so many things that they didn't really look at. And so we said right along, it's going to have to go for a while until they get to a point. Now the college presidents are saying to the coaches, you need to change this. You need to reel this in. Yeah. Well, the coaches weren't the ones that did it.
Created that environment.
So anyway, hopefully we'll see some things get back to normal on that.
Coach, when the counting stats were over, you had 242 wins, 82 losses, 12 MIAA titles, 3 national titles, lots of Hall of Fames. But obviously the relationships and your connection to the community was what kind of was the constant thread through all of that. And you kind of started this whole hashtag OAB, AAB, once a Bearcat, always a Bearcat. I mean, that really wasn't a thing. Branding wasn't maybe a thing when you came in 94. But you have talked about that Bearcat Paw being an important symbol and that ties it all together. What do you think when you see that?
I'm glad you brought that up. I've got it on here.
Yeah, I see that.
But no, it was interesting because when we came here in 94, January of 94, we were here and I got my staff here and we were getting ready for spring ball. And I remember going to the equipment room and looking at our equipment, and it was not real good. But the helmets had NWMSU, the letters on the side. And I remember Sabota, he just had a fit. He said, we can't have that on our helmets. Okay, well, you come up with something. And so a couple of weeks later, he comes into the weight room, and he's got a sheet, and he's got these different decals that we can put on the helmets. And one of them is the paw. And at that time, Truman was still Northeastern, so we couldn't use just the N. So we had an NW in the paw. And the kids all wanted that. So we said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And so we went to work and started getting those designed so we could have the decals for the helmets in the fall. And we started using it on our stationery, on our letters to recruits, and I remember one of our administrators came in my office and he said, Coach, I hate to tell you this, but that's not official. That's not a Northwest official symbol that we can use. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And he said, you go ahead and use it for football. And he said, we won't say anything. Well, now you go anywhere, you go to Kansas City or Des Moines or Omaha, and you see them, they're all over, they're in the back of every car, the Northwest grad. And so, that's a neat thing. My only regret is I wasn't as smart as Hayden Fry. He, when he did that with the Iowa stuff, he got a
royalty, huh?
Licensing fee.
Royalty on it. We don't get any royalties.
Oh man, that was a missed opportunity.
I was talking to my wife. We were talking about it a couple of days ago, and I said, I said that I've got to tell that story more because I don't think many of our alums really understand where that paw came from, but they need to hear that.
It is a great symbol, and there are so many fiercely loyal alums. I have a lot of them in my family. My daughter, who was 3 years in the track program and worked with you over at the Hughes Center a little bit.
Yeah.
She goes to these weddings, and these girls pose with that paw pose at the weddings in their gowns and everything. I mean, that paw is ubiquitous. It's out there.
It's pretty, it's become pretty neat. So we like it.
It's a big thing, and you made it a big thing. And Coach, as we wind up, is there anything you want to kind of close out with before I say thanks and sign off for our listeners?
No, I think like I said, it's neat. You talk about the wins and conference championships and all that, but when it comes right down to it, it's all about relationships. And I think that's because we approach it that way, and we did approach it that way with recruiting and with coaching our kids. That's why we were successful, because we built relationships and we built confidence. And for me to now see so many of these young men that we coached, and here they are having their own business, or they're a doctor, or they're a dentist, or whatever they are, and coaches. We got a bunch of guys that are coaching, and it's just so rewarding to see that. I think that's what it's really all about. And I think that, I know here at Northwest that's the way it is with all of our coaches, not just with football, but they do such a great job of building relationships and keeping that as the primary focus. So I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to be here. I mean, Northwest has been so good to us, and we retired and said, well, where are we going to go? And said, we're not going to leave Maryville. We did for a couple of years. We went back to Sherman, and I came back here as athletic director. We're here now, so it's pretty special.
Well, you've got an AD there now that's a friend of our podcast that follows a lot of those same principles too, so he's carrying on the tradition and doing a great job at that.
He's a good one. He's really doing a great job. And Andy, when we started, when I was coaching yet, Andy was playing, and then he was an assistant coach. And then when I got to be athletic director, he was part of our staff. Now he's in charge. And so it's rewarding to me to see him carry on. And he's very creative, and he can do a lot of things. He can fix things. I couldn't fix things. I had to have somebody fix them for me. But he grew up in that dairy farm. He can handle all that stuff. So
Yep.
I'm just really thrilled with what he's doing with our programs and how we progress. So that makes it a lot of fun.
That is great. And Coach, we want to thank you for sharing with us at Show-Me Sports Legacies. We hope your retirement continues to be full of all the fruits of your labor, and you're kind of the embodiment of all things Bearcat. And we appreciate your time with us today.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Coach. Great job.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Okay, Chris, there we have it. There's the second part of our episode with Coach Mel Tjeerdsma, famous in our parts of the world, well known all over the country, just one of those stalwart football coaches who built a dynasty.
And a lot of those themes that we've had in our podcasts over the last 3 years of belief and player-coach relationships and hard work, and even if we start off with 0 wins, we can see at the light at the end of the tunnel if we just keep on keeping on. And Coach Tjeerdsma is a great example of that, and a great role model for lots of coaches in this part of the country to build something, sustain it, and have long-term success.
I have noticed the Bearcat Paw everywhere only since Coach Tjeerdsma's time at Northwest. It wasn't a thing before at all.
Oh, and I've got friends and family that have strong ties, and being alumni of Central Missouri and the Mules, it always pains me a little to see the success and all of the notoriety that comes with being a Bearcat and that alum, but more power to them. And a lot of that has come from what Coach Tjeerdsma built at Northwest.
And they've taken that to other levels. They've won national championships since he left as coach, and their stadium just rocks every Saturday for a home game.
And a lot of that football success helped build their basketball success, which went on to be, a national power program with coaches moving on to Division I. So they've got a great thing going up there.
We are going to leave it at that. We've been happy to tell you this story, and thank you so much for listening to Show Me Sports Legacies.